Okay, thank you. This is Commissioner Allison Wright. I'm the chair of Legislative Review. It's Thursday, October 15th, 1 o'clock. 1 minute before, we're ready to call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Number 7 is Ovita dialed in on her phone, and I think everybody else has their name on there. I'm looking for approval for last meeting, Thursday, September 17th. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. I will now hand the meeting over to Assistant Manager Deborah.
Thank you, Commissioner Wright, and good afternoon, commissioners and everyone on the call. For today's agenda, there are 3 listed topics. One is the Traffic Calming Neighborhood Traffic Management Program. The second is review of the LEED certification program. And the third is the civil rights legislation. I do want to bring to your attention that Central Services Director Andrew Saunders is unable to be with us today and had to direct his attention to some personal matters. However, I have recently forwarded you an update on the LEED certification program, acknowledging that you received that at a late hour. But I do want you to know that it's in your emails. I believe then, Commissioner Wright, if you don't mind, if we could address the traffic management update first, and then moving on to Attorney Hines and the draft of the civil rights legislation, if that's okay with you.
That suits me, and if the committee's ready to move forward with that, we will. And I say go. And then we'll and if everybody will just review the LEED stuff, and we'll make sure that's on the agenda for next month, having read that material afterwards. Okay, thank you.
And Commissioner Wright, there is one additional matter that I would like to bring to the committee's attention. I don't know if you want to address it now or at the end, but on the upcoming voting session meeting, the November Mayor Commission meeting, currently under old business, we have the LRC recommendation pertaining to the inclusion office position. And I would like to know the pleasure of the LRC as it relates to just removing that matter. This is something that, of course, we'd have to take to the mayor also, but I don't want to proceed with that until I know the LRC's pleasure regarding just removing the matter. And not, if we leave the matter on the agenda, it may actually delay the position beyond the January date that we were trying to expedite. So I'm not certain if that's something, Commissioner Wright, you want to address now or at the end of the meeting.
No, I think now would be good, just because it's fresh in how you've explained it, that the timeline has shifted to where it seems like if we just let it go with the timeline from how the budget is delaying the process for hiring, it will move faster than if it's on the agenda. What's the committee feel about us taking that off of the voting session as old business so that it just moves forward organically, or however it would? What do you guys feel?
Do we need a motion for that?
I think so. Just to follow up.
I make a motion that we remove it off the November's agenda and let it go through the regular process.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. And all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? No. So the board, does that cover what you can take forward to the mayor and
Yes, Commissioner.
feedback? Okay. All right. We have that in the minutes. And all right. So now we'll go to traffic calming neighborhood traffic management.
Good afternoon, everyone. And you've probably noticed the document you received has a lot of blue and a lot of rewritten. So what I tried to do is make it more practical and easier to follow. And I wanted to start by giving you a background that would be helpful. And the background basically, besides talking a little bit about traffic calming, it also defines the different type of roadways and what you can do on these different type of roadways. Because this neighborhood traffic management program basically is for neighborhood residential streets and some local roadways, okay, depending on the roadway. And so I wanted to show you that and illustrate to you that in the background, there's some things that we must follow. Because we can't put speed bumps on a major collector because the speeds can never get down to 25 on a lot of these. So I hope that made a lot of sense to everybody. I hope that was helpful. And then what I tried to do in the procedure, instead of how we had it before, I basically just laid out how the process works and how you as a commissioner and how the neighborhood can address this and how they can make it work and what they need to do to get there. Of course, it starts within the beginning where an owner-occupied residence calls us and asks for thoughts. It brings up the concern about speeding on their roadway, but the district commissioner can too. The district commissioner, though, will need to go through the process that we have through the clerk, and then it comes to us, and then we address it that way. That's, of course, the standard process. Again, the traffic engineer will work on doing the limits. And then there was a question about why we look at 1,000 feet, because people traveling through, we want to make sure we address everything that we really need to address. And then we get the study area set out, and then we try to set up a meeting eventually. But what we're looking for when we do the traffic studies is we're looking for 300 vehicles per day with an 80th percentile speed of 30 miles an hour. Now, we have some places where that would fit with no problem, but some may not quite make it. But there are other issues that the traffic engineer sees, and I've listed those three, and I got them down to three because these are the three primary ones that would affect safety. And the combination of no sidewalks, narrow streets and roadways, cut through traffic 20% or more. That usually is where you have a lot of speeding vehicles. And it's close to a school, which, students walking in the street with no sidewalks, that's a major concern of ours. We've been very fortunate, in 11 years as a traffic engineer, never have a student hit by a vehicle. And so I would like to continue that. That's our concern.
Hey, Steve, I have a question or just some input on that point. You said that these are like the three most common, but you had other ones. Would it be helpful if we had a fourth one that said other elements as observed, or another sort of non-defined category, so that people knew that there are other factors that would be considered?
I'm sorry, I didn't. Do you want to
Go ahead
first?
Go ahead.
I personally feel like spelling out as many of those considerations as possible will help eliminate concerns that at least constituents of mine have expressed about the perceived subjectivity with which these decisions are made. If folks might feel like, oh, well, we're being discriminated against because they said that we can't have traffic calming in this neighborhood, when they don't know what considerations have been made or what considerations are viable. I think the clearer and more transparent those considerations are, the more we mitigate concerns that these are being made on a subjective and discriminatory basis.
And that's why I selected these three.
And I love that you included these. Yeah, thank you for that. That's really helpful.
These are the most common. And I think if we go bigger than this, I think we can open a big box that could be a bigger box than we can handle. But these are the ones that relate, if you look at it, relate to safety. They're 100% related to safety, which we actually use some of these on our local roadways as well. So these are the key that I really don't want to go any farther than that yet. If we find something and the traffic engineers see something that's not on the list, it's certainly open for discussion with the district commissioner and the commission. But I would say we should start with these three and not deviate from this at this time. That would be my recommendation.
Committee, is that okay with you guys, or do you want to have a category? Mariah, did you think it needs just another bullet there, or?
Yeah, I would agree with you, Commissioner Wright, that adding a bullet that just says there's other considerations, so folks know that you all do, consider many things, not just the cut through traffic and the school proximity, et cetera. That will be helpful.
Yeah. So then that was, however, that would be listed, Steve, that's other considerations, like when you do your traffic audit, or however you would want to phrase that, so that people can eliminate themselves just by not being in those top three categories because of the uniqueness that could happen.
I'm glad you said that. How about if I add that if the traffic engineers see the need for a safety audit to be done, and that would bring up something that's not on that list. That's more finite, and that's something that we do consistently. I could add that, and that would be a real positive move, I think.
Okay, good. Well, so that's good. Good way to capture what you feel looks best in there, but yet it also leaves a doorway open.
Okay, thank you.
Mariah, does that cover?
That works. Yeah, that works for me.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you,
Thanks
ma'am.
for allowing us to jump in there.
Well, that's fine. And of course, interrupt me anytime, because I sometimes I talk on and on. My wife says about me all the time. But you'll notice that I changed the minimum amount for support to 65%. All of our programs we have in Athens-Clarke County are 65%. So we did, for consistency, we made that. But I don't think that's going to be a real issue now that we're planning how we're trying to get the response back. So I think it'll change a lot. My screen's going crazy. Sorry. At the neighborhood meeting, that's the next step in this. And these are important. These meetings are very important. And we'll, like we talked before, we'll send meetings out to everybody on the street. Okay. Whether you're a homeowner or a renter, everybody's going to get the letter and get it started. Of course, if we need the police there, we'll have them. If we have a lot of speeding, they may have some other ideas. We've used them before when we find problems that related to speeding that they may be able to address, which sometimes soften the blow to the neighborhood. But prior to the meeting, of course, the traffic engineer will get the tax rolls to have all the homeowners, occupied homeowners, and he'll send out the meeting invitations. But at the meeting, we'll take attendance to see who's there and how many of the owner-occupied homeowners are there. So he has that listed already. That's a good thing to know. And of course, he will discuss the possible solutions. And this takes a little time because we have several things. We don't tell them what they need to have. We give them a list of things they could look at. They come back with us, yes or no, we'll do this. We try at that meeting to get a consensus, to get everybody feels like this is what we should do. And we never said, well, you need to do this, because that's their neighborhood. We want to give their neighborhood back to them. And so we don't tell them what to put in there. We might suggest that these might work, and we may have other alternatives. So we try to get a consensus, and we'll try to check off in that box to see how many of the consensus are the homeowners that live there. And then that gives us a number to start with. Then after the meeting, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. After that meeting, we'll send out notices to all the homeowners and get that back. We've got a new way of doing that back from the homeowners. Is they can call us, they can mail it back, or they can fax it on their computer. And any other way that we need to do it, if they send it to the commissioner or get it to the commissioner, we'll get it that way too. If we have to go by their house and pick it up, we'll do that as well. So we want to make sure that we give every option we possibly can have for everybody to provide their support. And the letters we send out, unless you haven't been to the meeting and you weren't able to voice your opinion, the only people that object to the ones that really need to respond. The others, if they're going to respond positive, that's a different. But if you're going to be negative, we certainly want your response. And we do tally those. The manager asked me if we tally those. Yes, those will be in the agenda report that goes who said yes, who said no, and that type of thing. And we also, when we go out and lay this out, I forgot the date, we'll go out, if it's, say, for speed humps, we lay these out where they're going to be, and we ask the homeowners to look at it and see how they feel about that. Because sometimes we've had to adjust a few of these. And that's something else that we tally to make sure that we have the right things. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that. And then, of course, once the 65% is achieved, we take it to the mayor and commission for their action. If approved, we implement the project. And then I think what we have done in the past, and we have found, when you put a traffic calming device in, you need to know that what you put in there is going to do what it was planned to do. And so we go back and check it. On a couple places, I've actually changed and added. Yes, ma'am.
So I had a question about project prioritization. Could we include in the ranking consideration of equity if there's areas that have been chronically underinvested in? Could we have that be considered with regards to how quickly we can get improvements made in an area. Perhaps stipulating that if an area is identified by HCD to be like low income, for example.
I'm open. I think we have done both. I don't know where we are because I haven't been here for 2 years, and I apologize. That 2-year lapse that I was away,
Sure.
things changed a little bit.
I've only been here 2 years too, man.
But in the past when I've worked with these programs, it was really tight money.
Yeah.
Very, very tight money. Now we have a very, very good budget, and so we can do a lot with a little, because a lot of these we buy the materials and do a lot of in-house. And so instead of spending $8,000 or $9,000 for a speed hump, it's now $500-$600. And so we'll be able to do more. And I'm hoping that with this new process that we do get more. And I when I was here as traffic engineer, I had a list of 14 to 20 monthly that were qualified, but I didn't have any money. And so we had to rank them based upon the highest. And that list probably still exists. And I would like to make sure that we're addressing that equitably.
Cool. Did any other commissioners want to weigh in on that? Are we all cool with that?
I think so. And if since this is a geographical sort of topic, it seems that we definitely could pull the census tracts, the population
Yeah, I was thinking
tracts
of
into
those
there.
that HCD kind of targets for funding.
Yeah, because this is a geographical thing that could help. And Steve, if you've got a ranking system, then they could get a 5. If the ranking is for more, more weight, that could be a 5 versus another area that's a 1. I have speed humps that have been here for 20 years that need repairing, and quite frankly, it might be time to take those out and use what is the digital solar speed thing. You know what I mean? So it's also, but if we already have speed humps, then the money would probably best be spent on an area that doesn't have anything now. You know what I mean? And help weigh out that. And same with sidewalk installation. I think that's applicable too, because that's real expensive, but it also solves the problem.
And on your existing speed humps that are as a wear over time, when we resurface a roadway, we do replace them.
Okay.
So that's part of the resurfacing program. We made sure of that, by the way.
Okay. All right. So if that can be added in, Steve, does that make sense to do it?
I will try. I'll work with Deborah and try to draft something, and we'll get it back to you.
Okay.
Stephen Bailey is a excellent candidate to help me with this. He's a brilliant man. And I wish I had his age. I wish I wasn't 71 years old, but because he has a lot of energy and he has a lot of knowledge. And I will certainly be working with Stephen to come up with something that's practical and works and makes sense.
And Commissioner Wright, may I ask a question related to that? When Steve completes his revision, is this something that you want to then forward it to the LRC, or just move forward in the agenda item process, because this item is already part of this current agenda cycle?
That's a good point, and thanks for bringing that up. I think that right now we have sort of minor improvements for the content, and if we're agreeable here to see the final version through email, that it can go ahead and stay in the cycle, because we voted last month for this to be in the cycle. It just needed more time with staff in the manager's office.
Yeah, I'm content with it staying in this cycle. I think the changes we're requesting are pretty small.
Yeah.
And so I trust you guys.
But does the committee want to see them next in the agenda, which is going to be Friday? Is that right, Deborah?
The agenda does go out on tomorrow. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yeah, that is tomorrow.
So
yeah. So is the committee okay with just seeing it? And that means we'll be done today, and we'll trust staff. And if we need to tweak it again, we can talk about that tweak on Tuesday.
That sounds good to me.
That'd be fine. It sounds good to me too. Let's move forward.
Okay. All right. We're still. We got one more page, right, to talk about.
I think I was on the last page where I talked about the evaluation process, prioritization, and our evaluation is critical, because we've had to go back and do some additional things because it didn't work.
yep.
Thank you.
They have problems of their own. And I hope that you'll be able to join the corridor committee, Commissioner Thornton. His talk about the insights on narrowing lanes might be beneficial at the corridor committee that we have next. Okay, any other input on this topic? Or Steve, I didn't cut you off, did I?
No, ma'am.
So,
Committee?
sorry, this is Stephen Bailey,
Yes,
jumping in
Stephen.
real quick.
Yeah, please.
Thanks. So, just a point on logistics, and I talked to Steve a little bit about this. I don't think this has to be in the policy itself, but just maybe something you might want to bring back to the larger Mayor Commission group is when we get to implementation and funding of these, once this policy has been passed, remember that this is working out of a fund balance, a pretty large fund balance of SPLOST 2011. It's about $365,000. So we won't necessarily immediately need to start prioritizing, because there's going to be enough money going around for a while to, for any project that comes up to get funded. What I would recommend is maybe thinking about, as soon as this policy is approved, maybe putting a 3-month hold or a 6-month hold on implementation, so that we do get all of those, it's broadening the eligibility to groups. So you get a large inflow of these projects. And then if we're close, we may not be close to spending $365,000 at that point. If not, great, we go and do all of them. But if we do, that gives us time to gather all of those new requests and put them through that new ranking, which would include, I like that idea of including equity and safety as part of that ranking. And then putting those forward as a proposed project list. In the future, it might not, it may be that we get future annual funds for this, and all we would do is every year we'd look at the list that came in, put them through the ranking. But for now, we may want to put a slight hold on implementing until we get enough requests through to know that these neighborhoods all have time to go through this new process.
This is Ovita speaking, and so when you're suggesting a possible 3-month hold, I have no problem with that. Do we, so who's going to take the responsibility to make sure we get the kind of comments from communities? Whose responsibility is that going to be on? I would hate to put something on hold when we know we already got some urgent issues, not knowing who is going to manage that type of follow-up.
Yeah, good point. So, the reason we first thought 3 months is because that's about the amount of time it takes from the very beginning of an initiation of this to go through the entire cycle. If as far as kind of promoting the program, I suppose that's up to each commissioner in their district, but also probably the PIO and the county itself, to let people know that this is the kind of the rules have changed on this, and it's a little bit broader for neighborhoods. So you're right. We want to make sure that within that period, the neighborhoods know about it and can start that process.
Okay, thank you.
So committee, do we feel like on Tuesday, when this comes out in the agenda, we can sort of cover this push that this is the new to start marketing that so that we can get the list that needs to be assessed, and then they can be ranked before funds are allocated. And Steve, would that also include you having that list that you already had?
I'm going to have to search. I'm going to have to search and find that list. That was done when I prepared. I may be able to find it. I want to check with the traffic engineering staff and see if they still have that list. Jimmy Rowland, our technician, kept an excellent records, and so I'm going to talk with him and Tim Griffith and see where we are. Because some of that they've already studied were under the old criteria, and so those that they've already studied, the new criteria can be applied. So I want to once this gets adopted, I want to go back with him and see how many of those we can go ahead and implement, or that we have contacts. We can contact the folks to see if they're still interested, and see if we can move forward.
Okay.
But I agree with Stephen. I really want to get the word out to everyone we can. And I'm really glad to see that we've dropped the requirements. The requirements before, I think, were too stringent. And I think the requirements are going to open the door and give the quality of life back to people that we really should have in their neighborhoods.
Okay, committee, any other input?
So if we adopt this at our next commission meeting, and we're talking about a 3-month, trying to make sure we get the word out. So then, are we thinking early February or January that we will go to some type of implementation?
That's the calendar. That's what it's looking like to me, Commissioner Thornton. It would be a November vote. That gives us December, which isn't always the best time to rally people, but it would be early spring, late winter, and then some of these implementations might need that warmer weather, depending on what's picked. Right, Steve?
Yes, ma'am. And if we have some that are ready to go, I would not really want to hold them too long. If they're ready to go and they seem like they might be simple projects, I would like to move with them. I don't really want to wait, because these people are going through what they're going through. The longer they have to wait to get something done, it still impacts them. So I'd like to move as quickly as we can.
Right.
And I don't want to inundate you with 300 at one time.
Especially during that criteria.
I do remember my excitement last month, and Assistant Manager Lunnan reminded me we had to have a policy because I do want, and I'll make this very public, I do want to make sure the folk in that North Athens area, whatever it takes, whether it's that initial meeting or output, that we that group has never known where to go to. So I mean, the 3 months is fine, but I think we all need to be real. I'm going to take a conscious effort to make sure my areas are addressed. So that's it. I'm good.
Okay. I don't know that we need to. Assistant Manager DeBoer, do we need a vote here, or we just need to discuss the topics, to discuss the details? We added a couple things, but we're ready for this to go in the packet on tomorrow with last week.
There was already a vote in our last meeting, to proceed with the recommendation of the LRC. And so today's meeting has primarily been a discussion of the details of the document that would serve as an attachment.
Steve, we might need you to mute the paperwork.
Will you mute, Steve? Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. So we're set to move forward. We'll see it in the packet, and we'll be discussing it with everybody on Tuesday.
Okay.
Right.
And so,
Okay.
Steve, if I could just make sure between you and Stephen and Tim, I would need the final version today, and I'll work on it tonight so that we get it to the clerk's office by her cutoff of 12 noon tomorrow.
Okay, fantastic.
All right. Thank you. And then I'll email it to the LRC, and the entire commission will have access to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. So lead certification program, we have a document that we can help get us up to speed for discussion next month, since Andrew needed to tend to some other matters. And so, Assistant Manager, this leaves us back to you for the third item.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And at this point, I will turn it over to Attorney Sherry Hines, and she has drafted, and I've shared with the LRC members a version or the most recent version, the first version of that proposed ordinance. And so, Sherry?
Sure. Thank you all for having me. I hope you guys are doing well. So I sent out that, or actually, I think Deborah sent out that latest draft, and I don't know if you've had a chance to review it, but basically I took your direction that you'd like a draft ordinances based on the Brookhaven model, which is what that almost entirely is. I did take some language out of the Decatur ordinance, not a lot, but a few things that I thought were helpful. And then I also changed a few things that were more specific to Brookhaven. For instance, like in the recitals, I think Brookhaven is listed as a welcoming city, which I think is a specific thing related to an ordinance. And I couldn't find any proof that we had ever adopted an ordinance or resolution that we were a welcoming city. So I took that part out. Not that we are not welcoming, because I believe we are. But those are the main changes. Otherwise, it's very similar to the Brookhaven ordinance. I know as we've talked, that there are some concerns that I've expressed in our confidential memo on this. And I think there are some questions about whether there's some language that you might prefer in the Decatur ordinance versus the Brookhaven ordinance. So like one sort of substantive example of that is if you are able to look at section 6-20-3, which is page 4, that part is the section that is basically describing individuals' rights, and it's titled Civil Rights Declared, and it says that they have the right to obtain and hold employment, the right to enjoy accommodations, and things like that. And I thought it was almost a little bit confusing in terms of how the violations are, I guess, how this ordinance contemplates that there would be violations. Whereas the Decatur ordinance specifically says it is unlawful to do certain things. This basically just articulates a number of rights, and the argument would be that violations of these rights are then unlawful. So I'll leave it to you all as to which you prefer, but I just wanted to point that out as kind of a substantive difference in how the ordinances are drafted, that you may prefer one over the other. But I think, it'll meet, I think either will meet the needs of what you were hoping to accomplish. The other thing that I want to point out, and I know Crystal wasn't able to be here with us today, but Crystal reviewed all of this and, had some thoughts to share. And basically, I think the main thing she wanted to advise is that just because we pass a non-discrimination ordinance does not mean necessarily that people will then use the complaint process really well. And that's something we've discussed as a problem that appears to be occurring in other areas. So she wanted to make sure that we considered ways to increase resident participation / engagement, potentially a concerted grassroots educational effort that is transparent and easy to understand would be something that you all might wish to consider. She also discovered a equity resolution from, I believe it was Arlington, Virginia, as something that you all might want to consider as well. It's a little bit different from a non-discrimination ordinance. And I told her that since she couldn't be here, I'd be happy to share those concerns with her if that's something you're interested in talking about, perhaps at another meeting. But I think we all acknowledge that the equity resolution is different than the non-discrimination ordinance, even though they could be very closely paired to work together. So are there any questions or things you'd like me to go through in the draft?
Committee, the resolution that she had mentioned, equity resolution, I wanted to have that as a discussion point to see if we wanted to compare that with the resolution of anti-discrimination that we passed, I think it was January 2017. As well as the Black Lives Matter resolution. I wanted to get the committee's feel on that. That's why I didn't add that into the agenda, because what we had requested was how this ordinance would look. But I say that in a way that I think that we can continue to study more rather than limit what we're discussing to move forward.
I feel like making a reference to the previous actions that we have taken could be helpful, but otherwise I feel like the language of the resolution is pretty clear and strong.
Okay.
Whereas in January 2017 we did this, whereas in June 2020.
Yeah. And then that maybe would capture some of the information that came forward at our last meeting that we could fold into here, that was our resolution that we passed then, the formulation of the task force as well. So the different agenda items that we had historically, right? Is that what you're referring to, Mariah? That could be folded into here? I think that's a good idea. I can say that I have not had time to thoroughly read this. So I do have more homework that I have to do on this, but I am interested in hearing what the committee thinks at this point.
Yeah, I would also like the opportunity to sort of read it over a little more thoroughly and see if I have any questions. Although at this point, I mean, I'm really pleased, and thank you so much, Attorney Hines, for the work you've done on this. I think we're almost there. I think we almost got it.
Yeah. So, do you agree? Does the committee agree that the point that she picked out, saying the right to, and using that terminology, fits a little bit better than trying to say it's a violation to, since we really don't have a setup for turning in a violation?
Can you say that again and specifically reference what page you're on?
This was, well, I don't have the page numbers on here, but it's under the 623 section. It starts off with civil rights declared. So it's declaring the rights.
Yeah.
And Sherry, help me make sure I don't misstate this. Go ahead. Will you want to repeat that? Because I think you did a better job than I did.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, why don't I share my screen, and that way I think it's visually easier to see a little bit better. So if this will share, okay, perfect. So what we're seeing now is the Decatur ordinance by comparison.
Okay.
So you can see this header up here. Hopefully this says unlawful practices. And then it has these 3 sections that really describe what is unlawful in a really specific and clear way. And not saying that it couldn't be written differently or better, just in the sense that an average person could pick this up and say, yes, I now know what is unlawful. Comparing that to the way that the Brookhaven ordinance did it, which is this one, and what it's saying is the rights of an otherwise, you can see it talks about the protected classes, and then it talks about the different rights that they hold, and then it continues on to enforcement. And basically it's just anybody it says, any person who believes they have been aggrieved by an alleged breach or violation of 623 of this chapter may file a complaint. So what they're basically saying is anybody who thinks that they've been aggrieved or that there's been a violation of these rights can file an action. So I guess my worry was that an average person isn't going to read 623 and necessarily know right off the bat, it's unlawful to do X. At the same time, you'd also hope that people would sort of interpret that it's unlawful to deny public accommodation. So I just wanted to point them out as different ways that the ordinances were written so that you could consider which you preferred.
So as we continue to read this, do we think as a committee it'd be good for us to have that? I got confused a little bit of that. The one that we currently have, you picked up on the Brookhaven because that's what the charge of the committee was, but you're saying that the Decatur spells it out a little more intuitively for the public reading.
I think for me, and I think this is just totally a preference, but I kind of like it to say these things are unlawful and have it all be in the same section. The way that the Brookhaven one is written is these are rights, and then you go down to 2 sections later and it says violations of those can be enforced XYZ way. And so I just think it's a little bit less clear since it's not in the same section.
I agree.
At the same time, I mean, clearly they're both used by prominent cities who are doing this kind of work. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the way Brookhaven is done. It's perhaps not my personal preference.
I agree.
So do we want a motion to sort of switch out that section, or to bring for the next committee, we would have it more with the Decatur version of it? Russell, do you want to make a motion to capture?
Yeah, I mean, the way it reads now, it basically declares rights. It almost sounds like a resolution.
Right.
Okay. So you want to put that in a motion, so then we can come back for the next discussion, it using the violations sort of terminology,
I think
as well
we
as
can maybe just put a provision somewhere in there. I mean, how about under 6023, section 6, any violation of these rights shall be actionable pursuant to section 625.
Yeah, I think that would also be an option. Absolutely.
Well, I'll have to see that. That's a little the attorney to attorney discussion there, but I think I get what you're saying. And then in the whereases part, could capture some of the previous things that the Mayor and Commission have done. And when we talk about this again at the next meeting, do we want to look at the equity resolution and compare it to the resolution we've done before, as well as the Black Lives Matter resolution? Is that?
I feel like no.
Okay.
Russell, what about you?
I don't really care about whereases, to be honest with you.
Okay.
And the meat of this thing is the rights that are being enumerated.
I don't think we need to match the language or transfer parts or anything like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, including all the whereas just dilutes the strength of what we're actually trying to accomplish. So,
okay. Well,
I'd like to just winnow it down to the actual rights that we're protecting and how those rights are going to be protected.
Okay. All right. So that we have enough whereases, and we'll add in a couple more for points of that we've done. And then I do agree that as we discuss this and move forward, we should be addressing and getting the input in more depth that we got from Crystal that was clear about how to use the complaint process and making that more user-friendly, so to speak, as well as increasing the educational component and making sure that we're getting out in the community about this.
And I think it's drafted pretty well. I mean, I agree with Attorney Hines. You know, we can make a clear connection between enforcement and the rights being protected. I think that helps the readability of this law and making it clear that there will be a new misdemeanor enforced against violators of these civil rights. I think that's really the key here. We are creating new locally enforceable civil rights laws. That's really the point that needs to be clear. And I was about to address what you just said, Chair Wright, about what were you saying? Sorry.
It had to do with
about Crystal. Okay. What I was saying there is that this new proposal looks clear to me that it is going to, I mean, some of this is going to be within the manager's office, within the enforcement arm of the government to create these forms. So I know that in this section on enforcement, citizen may file a complaint on a form to be provided by the unified government. The complaint form shall include the full name of the complainant, et cetera, et cetera. So it does provide some direction to staff as to what the form is going to be. I think, to me, it seems sufficient direction for management to then develop it.
Gotcha. And then now that we have the Office of Inclusion and her insights that she can improve it and other processes,
Yeah.
right? Because it's all still under the manager's arm.
Right.
Okay. I hear what you're saying. All right. So we want to see this again at the next meeting with the those improvements. Is that the wish and a motion from the committee?
I moved.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. All right. Avita, number 7. I'm glad you're still there. Okay. Our next meeting, we'll get back to the lead. We'll lead with this one. We'll start off with this one, this topic here. We'll get to the lead we've got traffic calmings moved out. I guess we need to look at our calendar for when's estimated quorum in November, because this might be Thanksgiving, third Thursday. Is that right? No.
I think the third Thursday is the 19th and Thanksgiving is the 26th.
Okay, so that we should be good then.
If everyone is still working the week before Thanksgiving.
Or wherever you are, we'll take all new backgrounds if everybody's out and about, right?
That's good for me.
Okay, so we'll just put that in the minutes that we plan to meet the November 19th will be our next meeting. And is there anything else committee or staff needs or administration? All right, good job, everybody.
I'm actually good.
I'm looking for one more motion.
I motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right, good job, everybody.
Thank you,
Great work.
Commissioner.
See you all next time. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you,
Bye.
Attorney Hines. Thank you, Deborah.
Have a good day.
Thank you.